Greetings, friends. What a day it has been. I'm sloppy and lopsided and all of that. I'm having a lot of problems with my asthma right now. So when you see me, I'm wearing stuff that is like, let's get dressed and not worry about what we look like. Let's just get dressed. Then we'll throw on some earrings and see what we look like. And if we don't look good, hell with it. We're having that kind of a day. Okay, if you know who I am, if you don't know who I am, I'm Suzanne Titkamai. I wrote for Pathos for nearly 10 years, like 9 3/4, about this very thing, about quiverful. Hey, Nitwit. Um, so I wrote about that, hey, Nikki, and all these different things to do with quiverful. And the Duggars really were the epitome of quiverful. They were the king and queen of quiverful. And they happened to come along at a very stressful time for me. But I had heard of the Duggars when I was still at my old Quiverful church because all these churches throughout the United States, they're kind of linked in like a bush, kind of like a bush telegram, or like we call it here, the coconut telegram, which is kind of prayer and gossip. Those are like two wings on the same bird. Hey, Cheryl. And the whole prayer gossip thing is just one of the craziest things you've ever wanted to see. I'm actually writing about that for my book while I'm doing some editing. What do I mean by prayer gossip? Well, there would be people that would want to know things, or they would want to gossip about somebody, and they would start talking about it. Hey, Dances in the Rain, thank you. I'm just kind of falling down on everything today. Okay. Have you heard about so and so? So and so really needs prayer because they fell headfirst into somebody else's vagina, and this happened, and that happened, and this happened. That's what I mean by prayer gossip. And there was a fair amount of it. My old church, I was on the altar ministry, so I was up there praying for people frequently, and people would tell me their troubles, and I would pray for them. And people would come up afterwards. I saw you praying for Joe Blow. What's his problem? I need to know how to pray for him. It's like, I can't share that with you. If Joe Blow wants you to know whatever his issue is, he will tell you. I am not Joe Blow. So I made a few enemies there. Grace Peter. Hey, just saw the title. I'm sure you're going to raise some good points, but in my humble opinion, the minute you protect the offender and throw the victims on the bus, you're done. Grace, exactly. It's not going to be a positive thing. I remember this kind of gossip at my church days. Yes, and it's very popular and just awful. Oh, the old prayer chain gossip grapevine. Yep. Just so I know how to pray for so and so. And you're like, you don't want to pray for so and so. You just want to know all the dirty, dirty details. And that was one thing I kept sacrosanct when I was at the church. Looking back, there are some things that I believed in and very strongly practiced that were preached church-wide that apparently nobody else believed in, like keeping confidential what prayer requests were. I left the prayer group after I was gossiped about. Someone actually came to me to discuss my situation. Cheryl, I read about gossip about me on a prayer chain that they were sending around via email. They said I had an abortion. It was really tragic because 3 months before I had lost a very wanted baby. We wanted another child that I'd lost 3 months before. And I had to have a grand total of 3 DNCs after that miscarriage to straighten out again because I had such problems with that part of my body. Smartest thing in the world was having a hysterectomy. It freed me up of all that crap. I had nothing but problems. So when I had my hysterectomy, it was great. And everybody up there was giving me crap about it. God can fix that. Nope. That thing is done. It must have been assembled on a Monday when everybody was hungover because it never worked right. It was in there backwards, and there was all kinds of scar tissue, and I had a lot of endo. So there it was. So thanks, Nikki, but it was no sorry. I should have had it done 10 years before, but I kept trying to have another child because quiverful. So right before I left my old quiverful church, we started to get prayer requests about a large quiverful family in Arkansas where the husband had been in and out of politics and they were getting ready to get a television show and they wanted prayer for wisdom and protection and all kinds of BS. It was eye-opening. I always kept prayer requests confidential. Cheryl, that's how it should be. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, can you pray for me about X, Y, or Z? You keep that X, Y, and Z secret. You take it to the grave. You don't tell anybody. But very few times where I actually told my husband about some of this stuff. One of the times was when they did an exorcism on the Stone Kid. And Linda, the lady running the group, said, nobody talk about this exorcism. And I went right home and told my husband, I said, I just saw the vilest, craziest thing I've ever witnessed in my entire life. I saw a quote exorcism that looked like it was just a bunch of bunk going on with a stone kid. So that did happen. And that was one of the few times. Most of the time I kept that stuff secret. So I had heard about the Duggars before they bust on the scene. Late 2006, early 2007, I left my old quiverful church. It went down in a hurry. My husband had been going back and forth between the church and the Methodist church, and he decided to go to the Methodist church. And I had a lot of conversations with the pastor. And the pastor said, don't worry about it. I'll take care of the gossipers, blah, blah, blah. So what ended up happening was the gossiper in chief started gossiping about me when I was up on the platform doing worship rehearsals. And my 14-year-old daughter overheard and started crying. So we left that day. And the pastor was trying to say stuff like, you need to divorce your husband and stay here. I was like, nope, nope, nope. So I left. I pulled up stakes and I left. And it was the most painful thing I've ever done. So in the middle of that, the Duggars, their show premieres. And for me, it was awful in every way because I was dealing with deconverting from this nonsense. Protecting your baby. That's exactly right, Grace. I realized that this was going to harm my children and that we had to go. So the Duggars emerged on the television screen right in the middle of my deconversion. So I was never a fan. I was always looking at their specials and seeing everything that was awful about my old church. It was a rule to be part of their prayer group, and the leader tried hard to keep people quiet. She removed some prayer partners and took major heat for it. I'm sure she did. I wish my parents would have protected us, but it was all about the church and their image. Grace, that's really common in those kind of churches. You're being taught that you are raising the next generation to be in the army of the Lord, Joel's army. That was what was important, was to raise them to be the right kind of Christians, not to protect them. You had to leave at that point. Yes, it got to the point where I just had to leave. I had to leave. 100%, especially when your dad's a pastor. I can barely imagine Grace Peters. I felt sorry for the two children of our pastor. Their mother died. It was tragic. And then they had to deal with a stepmother very quickly within a year. And they had to deal with everybody else in the church and these nutty beliefs that started happening towards the end of our time there. And it's kind of funny because one of the two children, when I run into him, he's still happy to see me, and I'm happy to see him. The youngest, though, it's like flaming rocks being thrown. So I have no relationship with her whatsoever. Poor babies. Yeah, they really went through it. So I was watching all these specials from the very beginning, and I remember the very first special when Michelle Duggar started explaining about blanket training and quoting other stuff straight out of Michael Pearl's book, To Train Up a Child, or like I like to call it, To Beat Up a Child, because it's an abuse manual, I believe. That's my opinion on this. Don't go harass him over it. So she was promoting that. She was promoting the abuse perpetuated by Michael Pearl. And I was like, you are not a good person. You are just not. And they had the kids living on the cheapest, grossest food you ever laid eyes on. I saw the way they were living their lives in like I'm going to call it a sub-existence, because I knew so many people in, it's incredibly damaging. They had some of the craziest ideas about how to raise kids. They had some of the craziest ideas about how to pinch pennies. And I saw this played out just like the Duggars. In fact, I knew a lady that her and Michelle could have been interchangeable. Their voices, their attitudes, the way they talked, the way they looked up at their husbands, identical. And I knew this woman. Oh, have a good day, Grace. I knew this woman was very sweet. She was a very sweet, kind individual in her heart. But I saw how she ran her family, and it was very much like what we saw with the Duggars. So with every new special of Duggars, everything that people were criticizing them on television without pity and some of the other boards, the Duggars changed it just a little, just a hair. Like they got crap about what they were feeding the kids. The next thing you know, they're doing an episode where they're giving the kids canned green beans and oranges along with their bologna sandwiches. So for me, it was just seeing the abuse that I walked out of writ large on the screen. So I dispute whether they're good people or not. They don't even have good intentions. And every time I shouted this out from NLQ, when I wrote about No Longer Quivering, I had a cadre of people that were supporters that posted there all the time, and that was fine. They agreed with me. But every time you said the word Duggar, in piled all the huggers. The huggers are the reason that I finally started Jerks for Jesus, because you just could not win for losing. Anything you said about the Duggars, they would hurl flaming rocks at you about how righteous the Duggars were. And no amount of trying to say, yeah, no, I walked out of that life. I know what the damage is. I've walked out of it. I've lived that life, and I know how dangerous it is on so many levels, and how toxic many of the beliefs are, even if I didn't embrace everything about it. Like someone tried to give me Michael Pearl's book early on when my daughter had platelet problems, and there was no way I was going to lay a hand on her. But they were insisting I beat her. Well, I did not. I just threw that book away. So knowing that the Duggars were changing things all the time, too, to answer criticism, always struck me as beyond disingenuous. So by the time we got to the end of the Duggar show, they had changed so much, and they had embraced the whole, I'm going to call it the Christo-fascist thing, where they were flying pro-Trump flags and F. Biden type flags and all sorts of things. And every time you saw them, they were all armed to the teeth. So no, I don't think they're good people. And the biggest evidence that they are not good people is how they handled what Josh did to his sisters. Way back before there was anything else going on with Josh being exposed, looking at Daisy's destruction or anything else, there was Josh inappropriately touching four of his sisters and another girl. Oh, hey, Shelley. And his family covered for him at the same time that they brought him to the cops to kind of have some fear of God thrown in him about what he was doing. One of the things that I did in NLQ is I did a timeline side by side of what the Duggars said in their interview with Megyn Kelly and what they actually did. And it was a pretty disturbing and eye-opening timeline. I also hold TLC responsible because Josh's lawsuit against Arkansas DHS took place the day after they filmed the birth of one of Michelle's babies. So you know damn good and well they had to have known something. All the activities that his parents did to cover it up, sending him away to Bill Gothard's camp to get him straightened out, where all he did was physical labor. Not one bit of counseling whatsoever. And that always disturbed me, because once you've crossed that line and you're showing you're doing these disturbing things, the only thing that will stop you on that slip and slide straight into depravity is good early intervention with a therapist. And there are certainly a pile of therapists that's all they do is treat teenagers for these weird things, and they didn't take him. I feel almost sorry for Josh. And note I said almost, not actually sorry, because he never faced any real consequences for the things he did. His parents covered up everything about him and all the stuff he was doing. And so, okay, there's two cats fighting on the bed. You can't see that, but one cat is under the covers, the other one's above, and they're fighting with each other. So I'm not going to interfere with that. Nobody's getting hurt. It's just being annoying. So back to the Duggars. So his parents had covered everything. They did not get him any kind of real help. So it was rumored that as time went on, the things he did were even worse. He was caught looking at hardcore porn on Jim Holt's campaign computers as a teenager. Jim Holt broke off the engagement with his daughter, I understand, and booted him from the campaign. Jim Bob and Jim Holt had a falling out then, and they became almost enemies at that point. And it continued. More and more crazier stories came out about Josh, or immediately squashed by the family. And then we get to the reveal about what he did to the sisters. It makes me almost cry to think that those girls received no counseling whatsoever for what their brother did to them. And we're seeing that having terrible echoes. I'm happy that Jill has gotten out and she seems like she's getting therapy, according to Derek. That is an awesome thing. I think that Derek has turned out to be a much better partner than I ever dreamed. The others, not so much. They are still kind of spinning and trying to be famous on what the parents have done. One of the most awful things I've ever viewed in my life was when Jim Bob and Michelle went on the Megyn Kelly show. Up until that moment, nobody knew for sure who the victims were. All we knew is 4 sisters. Nobody knew which 4 sisters. Nobody was saying which 4 sisters, except for some of their trashy gossip things. Jim Bob and Michelle exposed who 2 of the victims were that night when they forced the 2 sisters to come forward and talk about what Josh had done to them and how they forgave him. I will never forget watching poor Jill cry about what had been done to her and thinking these people are evil. I mean, they've gone past just being jackasses that are following the IBLPs and what Michael Pearl was teaching. They've gone all the way to evil now. Hey to you in the in Norway. That breaks my heart for those girls. Nikki, it was awful. It was so awful at the time. And gossip bloggers are making bank on that. They were just like every day was something. Our dear Catherine was not on the scene at that point, not at all. A year later, it came out about Josh and Ashley Madison and other prominent Christians who were on that list. But the media seized upon Josh for this when there were others doing it as well. Not saying it's right, because having affairs is clearly not right if you're not in a open relationship. And what he was doing was just not right. And Poor Anna Duggar. Her in-laws pretty much ordered her to suck it up and forgive him. So the pressure was put on her at that time. At some point, and through the years, I had heard stuff through the grapevine, through the church gossip list, through people who lived in that part of Arkansas about what was going on. And here's the thing. When I was writing for Pathos, I would follow the Pathos best practice manual. And one of the things it talked about was if you couldn't source something, you shouldn't use it. So because I couldn't actually confirm a lot of this crap, I didn't use any of those rumors. So later when I was working with KJ and I was talking to her about various things, and she was asking me about the Duggars, I was telling her all the Duggar gossip. The question is, who molested Josh? Because it happened, I'm sure. Church leader, friend of the family. Shelley, I believe it happened. I believe that happened because do you remember when it was exposed that Josh had done this to his sisters? They came out, cats. They came out and said, Jim Bob did. He said, oh, this is common in Quiverful. We have families where kids are playing doctor all the time. This kind of touching and stuff. It happens, it happens, it happens. Here's what I can tell you about that from my old church. Yes, it happens. Yes, it happens. Yes, it's pushed under the rug. Yes, everybody pretends it didn't happen. And I've talked about that there was higher numbers of people who did that stuff. There were higher numbers of people who had affairs, all kinds of awful things, while they were trying to pretend they were so righteous. It's just eye-opening to see that and to start. I didn't even run the numbers until recently when I started thinking, this happened, this happened, this happened. And I started dividing out by the number of people we had and figuring out how many were actually involved in that crap. And it's wicked. It is wicked. And the name that keeps coming to mind when I start talking about this crap in these churches is Molech. And you remember the Old Testament, Molech was it was an idol that people were sacrificing their children to. This is just the New Testament version of Molech going on. So our dear friend sees in all this, and that has been her bread and butter since, is outrageous, bloated, faked, pumped up Duggar content. That is how she makes her coin. There are a lot of Duggar haters out there, and there were a lot of Duggar huggers, and they will all watch this crap. But at the same time, like I said, you don't expose those things that you can't confirm. I couldn't confirm that the one they were telling me was the gay Duggar boy. I couldn't confirm for sure anywhere. I believe it was probably true, but that's a pretty bold statement to make, and you don't want to be speculating on a child's sexuality, especially in that environment. In that cult, when you have people who are outed as having a sexuality that's not one man, one woman in the dark, man on top, get it over with quick, missionary sex, you put that person, you put their life in jeopardy, because sometimes these people flip out and they will throw a kid out. There have been cases where people have been murdered as a result of those kinds of rumors in these communities. There's just a lot of just wicked, wicked stuff that is wrapped in Bible pages that involves things like this. I think the minute that Jim Bob started covering for Josh is the minute that he lost any semblance of ever being able to say that he was a good patriarch, which we hear that a lot about a lot of the men in these cult churches. Good patriarch, good patriarch. Bollocks. No, bad patriarch as far as I'm concerned. Not that there are ever good patriarchs. I'm one of these people that I like the t-shirt. My favorite season is fall, the fall of patriarchy, because I think patriarchy is a load of baloney that was sold to the church and glommed onto the words of Jesus. I keep hearing rumors that it is Michelle that is the one driving the Josh protection train, but I don't know that. I have seen Jim Bob do quite a lot of moral limbo to try and keep Josh out of all of his wrongdoings. And here's the thing that just breaks my heart for Josh. Like you said, Josh may have been molested himself at some point. He may have been. Hey, nobody. But what happened to him? It created all this. If they had just dealt with him when he first started acting out, if they had just taken him to somebody who deals with this sort of thing in particular and gotten him therapy, we could be in a very different place right now instead of him being incarcerated in a federal prison near Dallas, Texas, and his wife living near him so that she can go visit him. And that's another thing that kind of blows my mind that I've heard about lately are people trying to catfish him in prison, writing to him and trying to catfish him. And that's not right either. That's one thing that has always bothered me about the anti and the pro Duggar movement is how they have attempted to assert themselves in these people's real lives in all kinds of crazy ways. Nobody deserves that. That doesn't need to happen to anyone. And Josh is well and truly goose cooked at this point. Even if he does manage to get out, they're never going to allow him to be around children again, live with children, not even his own, I have a feeling. And he's going to carry that moniker with him forever, that SA moniker. He's going to be on the lists. He's going to be on the predator list where you can look up and see if there is somebody that has been convicted of SA living in your neighborhood. So he's going to have a hard time. He's not going to be able to live within so many feet of a school or even a church. And this all could have been so easily prevented. So I guess what I'm saying is Michelle and Jim Bob Duggar are just a couple of steps away from the devil in my book because of the sacrificing the daughters, the things they've taught their kids about sexuality that are so wrong that have created this mess. When you're a teenager and you're going through puberty, the last thing you need is somebody telling you that your every thought is a sin, that you're committing thought sins. And not only 100% pure and there's no mastery, there's none of that. There's no outlet whatsoever for your burgeoning sexuality, which is wrong because you and I know that teenage boys especially are going to do that stuff. Maybe some girls and girls too. I know that pisses some people off. When I used to write for NLQ, it was funny because every time I wrote about a woman's sexual agency and a woman's women enjoying sex and things like that, there was somebody that would come along and report it. It was kind of funny. It got to be very funny that somebody was doing this and we were kind of like, yeah, somebody has sexual problems that they don't want to cop to. Yeah, women do like sex too. And in that cult, they don't always like sex. All you have to do is read Lori Alexander's ravings about 5 minutes in lube and how you have to sacrifice to your husband and to sacrifice and give him the sex. I'm kind of like, why should there be sacrifice involved? Shouldn't you be having fun? So because I teach this extreme chastity where your own thoughts are sins, you end up in these weird places, very weird places. I've talked about this a couple times, and I have the story, it's going in my book about the boy that got up at the conference, the Freedom from Besetting Sins conference, and talked about how Jesus had set him free. He was 14 of masturbating like 10 times a day. And you could hear the shocked gasps of everybody in the church because this boy was just telling all. And while part of me was kind of tickled over this because I wanted to go up to him and put my hand on his shoulders, kid, you're normal. All of that you were talking about was a sin is normal. But I never got the opportunity to do that because that family changed churches very shortly after that. But when you teach this hyper modesty nonsense and you make all women the gatekeepers of sex, it becomes easy to understand why Michelle Duggar and Jim Bob threw the daughters under the bus, because they would have told them that, in fact, this comes straight out of the wisdom booklets that Bill Gothard used to publish with IBLP, that you were taught if you are a woman, a girl, and that happens to you, you have done something to indicate you're not modest, you're not pure, and to bring it on yourself. So you have to repent before you can forgive anyone. Obviously, no one taught the men to be lovers, not jump on and get off. That's true. When you have hyper modesty, then you don't have, there's no channel for talking about sexuality, explaining about it. There's no healthy sexuality. It's just submit, submit, submit. And that's, you're missing a whole long bit of the whole thing if that's where you are in your sexuality. And to blame women and to turn them into gatekeepers is just wrong. So wrong. And they don't presume that nobody enjoys sex. The Duggars seem to think that all sins are equal, or at least that seems to be the explanation for the CP. But that makes me feel like I've already sinned in the shower. So now I might as well have a go for it. Yeah, no, buddy, that is kind of how it is. Sin all over the place. Thought sin. And thought sin was one of the hardest ones that I had to overcome once I left. Your own thoughts aren't sinful. It's not thoughts that are sinful. If you're going to have something you're going to call sin, it's actions. I mean, I don't know about you, but my mind wanders all the time. And there is no way that I believe that the millisecond that I'm wondering about, how did that Hey Kool-Aid man bust in all those walls and not break his glass, or other just random stupid thoughts are sin. They're not. They're just random stupid thoughts. We all get them. We all get them. And to deny that is to really set people up to fail. A lot of everything about Quiverful is set up for failure, including telling women that if they do not submit the right way, submit hard enough, pray the right way, do this the right way, the other thing, then God won't change your husbands into righteous men. So again, the onus for everything is put on women. I got to observe the Duggars up close and personal. One time I went to a book signing. I bought 3 books and had them signed and then stuck them right on eBay after I read one of them. And I got to see them up close and personal. And I observed what I thought might be the case, that Michelle Duggar is actually running the joint. She's actually the one. He turns to her, Jim Bob, for approval so many times when they were talking that it was pretty obvious that, like almost everybody else I knew in Quiverful, it was the wife that drug them in. It was a wife that was running everything. Manipulating the man from behind the scenes. I stand by that with the Duggars too. I am convinced of that. Now, I know that's just my own opinion. I have no proof of that, no way of saying that's 100% true. But that was the impression I picked up. It was a strange experience. I only had 2 conversations in that book signing line that were worth a damn, that were interesting. One was with the boy that rumors said was gay. He was complimenting me my pants and my sweater combo. And I thought I was looking cute that day. The other thing was with Anna Duggar. She seemed pretty normal. Now I'm hearing since then that she's quite the petty pants. And I can kind of see that too from the conversation. Oh, and I could not get over the idea of her and Josh living in the greater DC area, because I know how expensive and go it is. It's a completely different atmosphere than Arkansas. And I don't know how well they would have adjusted. I'm sure they weren't there that long. And when I did see the Duggars, Josh rushed in, hurried, and harassed at the last second, fatter than ever and almost balding. And he seemed like he was floundering so much. So Josh in prison, Jim Bob and Michelle made that monster. He was created by their theology and their covering for him. This was the first time he actually had to receive any kind of consequences for the things he was doing. My mom plainly said, they are in a cult. Your mom is exactly right, Debbie. They are in a cult. IBLP is definitely has high demand religious organization, red flags all over it. So does Michael and Debbie Pearl and in their No Greater Joy ministry, giant red flags. And so many of the other things the Duggars endorsed, giant red flags, huge, huge. And I have to throw this out there about Michael and Debbie Pearl. I've gone a couple times recently and looked at their website and was reading through their magazine. I used to always say when I worked for NLQ, 6 times a year, sometimes 4 times a year, I would be blessed with the pile of nonsense that was No Greater Joy magazine, where I could take a couple of snippets from the articles and break them down why they were so damn toxic. And it was like Christmas. It was like, yes, I get to see something crazy. They wanted my mom's church to support them and were told, hell no. They tried to get the church I was part of to support them later. And things had already gotten so crazy there with the money that they were told hell no to. Oh, so what was I saying? I was saying something and I totally lost my tiny train of thought. But I think that I was talking about Michael Pearl. Reading through the Pearl magazines, I think it's very likely that Michael Pearl has had more strokes and more things have happened that Debbie is trying desperately to cover, because the magazine used to be Mike's mouthpiece. It's where he gave his sermons. Now Debbie is writing all the articles and they all relate back to her stupid book, Neuroplasticity, Building a Better Brain. I think that was it. And that book is one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Even crazier, there's a chapter on Janessa Rodriguez, Jill Rodriguez's baby that was born with no connection between the two halves of her brain, and she'd had several strokes in utero and was not projected to have a great outcome. Now, what was going on was Jill was claiming that neuroplasticity had kicked in and the baby was normal at a year. What I can tell you, what I know about children and normal development, is kids with those kinds of issues may meet all their milestones that first year. They may even the second year. And then it becomes obvious where the deficiencies are. I think that's going to be the same for this poor child. I pray it's not. I pray I'm wrong, because that would be the most awesome thing for her to come out with no damage. But I don't know. My mom said they set Arkansas back 100 years. Yes, they did. And not only Arkansas, they set back the South 100 years as far as I'm concerned, because they are promoting something that just does not work, as though it's the greatest thing on the planet. Okay, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and go. This has been a crazy bad asthma week, and I am still just all over the place with this. So I'm going to do like I did yesterday. I'm just going to do laundry and swan around the bedroom, take a nap, do stuff like that. And I'm going to be thinking about the Duggars and all their BS, because I have a lot more to say about them and some of the things that they believe in and they do. I am really praying that Jill gets a healing from all this, because she's the one that has stepped away. And I'm going to say this, I think at some point we're going to get a tell-all book. Now, whether it's Derek or one of the other kids, who knows? But now that the gravy train has stopped, and I don't think Jim Bob does not strike me as somebody who his money wisely. I just don't see that. I just don't see him doing that. I think as the money runs out and all the Duggars that are being supported by Jim Bob and Michelle have to support themselves, we're going to see some crazy things go on, and we're going to see somebody try to cash in. Somebody is going to turn against them and write the tell all. And I hate to say it, as sad as it is, I am kind of here for that, especially after having suffered through some of this same nonsense. And knowing some of it was nonsense, but not having enough strength of character at the time to say anything about it, because I knew to speak up would be to be put outside the group. And it was funny because Cindy Kunstman and I were actually talking about this thing this morning. If you don't fit well in the group, if you express any kind of doubt whatsoever, then you get thrown out. You just do. And I painted a painting a couple of years ago that kind of described it for me. It was a black sheep at the bottom of a hill, held back by a fence. And it was a pile of white sheep at the top of the hill. That's really what it's like when you leave these things and you're yearning, looking up at them, trying to figure out what you did wrong and why you've been cast into the outer darkness, but you have. And they make it obvious to you. If you try to maintain any of your friendships, they make it very difficult. They aren't very accepting. For people that try to say they love everybody, they sure treat a lot of people with hate. And with that, I'm going to leave. Thank you for watching and have a great day. Can we take bets on which daughter is going to have to stay or move back in the big house to take care of Michelle and Jim Bob? Yeah, we can do that. We can do that. I'll have to set that up. I'll see you later.